Hello, this is my day 9 drawing for Inktober. Because it's Halloween, I wanted to draw something with a skull. Not to mention, skulls are also generally portrayed as white, so I thought it would be interesting to try and use pen and ink to shade while still leaving the skull looking white. It was a little bit of a challenge because normally when I draw skulls, they're very cartoony looking. But for this skull, I tried to make it a little bit more realistic. Minus canine vampire teeth. You know, it's still Halloween. And just a skull's a little boring. And because I just like weird, cute things, I decided to add some snails hanging around on Mr. Skull. I think snails are super cute for bugs, and thought it would just be cute and weird to have them hanging around this vampire skull for no apparent reason. I started off with inking the skull. I felt that was the hardest thing to do, so I wanted to get it out of the way. I was quite intimidated with shading inside the nose and inside the eyes. Looking at different reference pictures, it's just so varied, and I didn't completely understand how an eye socket is inside, so that made it a bit difficult for me to do the shading properly, I think. But I tried. In this video, I also see I'm starting to get a little bit better of a handle on pressure with my Pocket Pilot brush pen. I am managing some decently thin lines in some areas, but also managing to take advantage of how dark you can get your lines to be and how thick you can get them to be if you apply more pressure, particularly when I'm looking at the snail shells. I did not want to smear any of the inking I'd done so far, so I placed a piece of paper over the skull and the snail shell so that I could get on inking the remaining snail in the bottom left corner. After giving it some time to dry, I returned to the drawing with the intent to finish shading. I felt like my initial sketch lines would be a little bit too distracting for me, so I wanted to get rid of them before I continued shading. I brought out a thin Micron pen so I could do smaller lines of more cross-hatching, and I felt using an obviously different pen would create more variety in the look of this. I just focused on the shapes of the skull and how the bones would curve. I also used dots to create texture as well and used them to add a bit of shading to the teeth. I also felt the dots made the cross-hatching a little less intense, thereby making it a little bit more natural looking. I was quite proud of how it looked where the cheek and the jaw met. I really liked how I'd managed to convey the super dark space where it's not attached, but also still managed to have it slowly bleed out into cross-hatching and a less intense shadow. I thought it just looked good. Then I added a few more lines around the skull to make it look a little bit more broken, as well as added some lines under the snails and the skull to convey the light source. Then poked at the eyes a bit more. When I'm drawing, I generally don't do a section and go, this is done. I'll work on one section at a time, but I tend to go back and pick on things. I mainly use dots to shade Mr. Snail. I thought it would create a nice contrast with the skull that's mostly white and cross-hatching with just a touch of dots thrown in. The snail shells were quite intimidating for me to try and shade with pen and ink. I was concerned about the cross-hatching making it look more furry than anything, but combining it with dots gave me a look I was quite pleased with. I didn't want the snail shells to look too flat compared to the skull. And there, I'm done. Thank you so much for watching.